I believe we are live. So, it tells me an error occurred. Please try again later. Oh, I think we're live. Okay. I just need to refresh this, I suppose. So today we're going back to the basics a little bit. Hopefully we are live. Hey,
We are.
you guys. Because my software is showing us as an error. All right, on my phone I can see us. Perfect. All right, so today we're going to go a little bit back to the basics. Last week we talked about macroalgae. One of the things that we realized at Global, hey Millie, so Millie actually works for us. I'm going to make you be a moderator. So Millie is part of our sales support staff. So she's great. We love Millie. Hey Davo. Thanks, Millie. Let us know if the audio is good. Thank you. Perfect. You say something, Shelby.
Hello.
Because I think that's where I normally mess up on the audios on your side of things. All right. So when we were at Global a couple of weeks ago, we realized that we've done a really good job with the aspirational content. We're getting kind of high level on a lot of the aquascaping content that we're doing. But sometimes it feels like maybe we leave out those beginning hobbyists. A story I always like to tell is my sister, who lived with me my whole life. She's only about a year and a half younger than me. When I was in high school, I think I had like 18 fish tanks. Perfect, everybody. Thank you. And last summer, she started an aquarium, but she didn't tell me about it. And finally, after she had like cycled through her fifth set of fish, she called me to be like, hey, all these fish are dying. What am I doing wrong? And basically, she was adding too many fish to the tank. And two, she wasn't allowing the tank to cycle. So she kept having issues with the water getting cloudy, some type of bacterial bloom, the fish dying. She also didn't have enough oxygenation happening in the tank. So, like, I'm sure the fish were suffocating. And the fish would die, and she would clean everything back up, like bleach everything, and start it over. So sometimes we forget about how much you don't know when you first get started. All she wanted was a pretty tank. I went through all the process with her and explained to her what to do and how to do it. And now she has 3 tanks. She has joined us in the multiple tank syndrome, and each one has gotten bigger and bigger. And now she's even doing some planted tanks. So I think a lot of times if we can make sure, I too made this mistake. Millie said she's ready to try again. I've walked her through some of these issues. But I think a lot of times, like these little blunders at the beginning, like we don't know what we don't know. And my sister really cared about the fish, and she was very upset that she kept killing the fish. And sometimes I think we think that people who are doing this don't care about fish. It's the turn and burn mentality, like, oh, they were cheap, we're going to get rid of them anyway. But my sister actually cared, and she couldn't figure out what she was doing wrong. And then I think she got embarrassed to say, hey, I'm having this problem. So sometimes like getting back to those basics really is important. So
Yeah, I've been there where you want the tank really bad, and there's not like common knowledge when you go places. And some people might think that because they're in the hobby, they've done fish tanks or known someone that did have a fish tank. But when you don't have anyone that's there to guide you, I've done the same thing. I've had tanks. I was lucky enough to have well water, able to keep the fish alive. I don't know how they survived. Now looking back at it going, how did those fish survive my antics?
yeah, I mean, years ago when I was in high school, I figured it out by trial and error because, God, that was like almost 30 years ago now. And I think a lot, like the internet wasn't even around yet. So pre-internet, so there wasn't really anybody for me to ask.
Yeah.
And I think at some points it was just a matter of, I don't even think I realized a cycle was what was happening. I just realized like you had to let the tank get a little bit dirty, otherwise the fish wouldn't live. I think I had this idea that like they were eating the stuff in it or something. But I had no information, so I don't know how I had 18 tanks that were successful. I'm sure at some point I figured out the cycle, but I don't ever remember being taught the nitrogen cycle.
I didn't learn. I just kept cleaning it weekly. So it never went through that cycle, the ammonia. It never got to that. So it just kept getting completely fresh every time. So
yeah. And I think like it was when after I had my son, who's 11 now, we got him a fish tank. And I think that's the first time I had a test kit to even test for ammonia and nitrite and nitrate. I knew it was a thing when I was in high school, but I wasn't going to spend my money on that. Yeah, Millie said the cloudy water definitely made her think her tank was dirty. I think that's a big misconception. You don't realize it's just bacteria growing in the tank that you need. Makes you feel like you need to dump it all out and start over. We made it, yeah. So we're gonna go back to the basics, walking through exactly how to set up your very first aquascape. This is going to be a 2-part series, I think, and hopefully it doesn't get pushed to 3-part. Whether you're new to the hobby or just need a reset, this is for you. All right. Before you even buy your tank, I'm looking at my notes. Before you even buy your tank, it's good to think about your goals. The first thing you want to do is ask yourself what kind of aquascape inspires you. Minimal rockscapes, jungle-style planted tank, something clean and serene. Do you want SpongeBob? Like, I think that we're doing a collaboration with Pimplex where they're going to be sending us some of their setups, so that way we can do some aquascapes, some different kinds of aquascapes with some of those fake decor. I don't know why I do this because it's definitely fake. But that we tend to look down on as aquascapers, because that's part of the experience for some people. I feel like every fish mom at some point has had a scuba diver or a treasure chest in their tank. They might have been little, but at some point, like that's part of the process, right?
Yep. See, I don't think there's anything wrong with fake decor. I mean, obviously tanks are even better when you do live plants. There's so many benefits to it, but I don't think there's anything wrong with having some fun stuff in your tank and doing live plants. To me, there's a perfect balance that would have kids very excited for their awesome SpongeBob to their beautiful plants and educated on how to get those started. But back to going to the beginning, like where we're going to start is, you need to know what size tank. That matters so much when doing anything. What is going to go in it. Your space you have for it is really what is going to bring down to like where you can start and go from there, is what size tank, because you can't plan for Oscars if your space is only a 5-gallon tank.
Yeah, because Oscars get real big.
Yeah. So
what were you going to say? Sorry.
But yeah, anywhere from a nano up, like it's just easy to, start. That's where you want to start off at. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think some of it also knowing where you want to put the fish tank. We've actually been looking at houses, and I'm going into the houses like, where am I going to put my fish tank? And the realtors, I think, are really put off by that, because they're like, but other than that, where's the house? It's like, no, you don't understand. Like, I have a big fish tank. It needs to have a place to go. One of the ones I walked into this weekend, they're like, well, this house has a fish tank, and they were so excited to show me the fish tank, and it was like a little like 1-gallon cube. And like, you can put it right here, and I'm like, no, you don't understand. So like knowing where you're going to put the fish tank is going to dictate a lot of your size also, because you can't do a giant almost 200-gallon tank like I have over here if you don't have the support for it, and like the floor support for it, and the space for it.
Yeah.
Everyone knows Oscars need at least a 10-gallon tank. At least, at least.
At least.
All right, so can you tell us a little bit about the difference between a tank size of nano versus something we'd consider more standard and maybe going into the large size?
Yeah, so that could limit you a lot on nano, obviously being just your fish alone. There's not many fish that I can actually be in a nano and be raised successfully. You usually want the standard, I would say, is a 10-gallon tank that usually can house most nano fish and be a really good standard tank. But 20s and higher up, it's harder to find room for them. It's harder to do water changes. The maintenance alone just becomes a little bit more tough. And then obviously you have to have more supplies for that. So like where a nano tank, I only need a few bags of substrate. You start getting more and more substrate for the larger the tank. So it's also kind of come in and wrap into how much you really want to spend on a tank. And to make it look
You're
good.
always going to spend more than you want to spend.
Yeah. Yeah. So you could try to have a realistic budget, but there is none. But with the nanos, you can do a really good tank and not have to pay as much as you would for a bigger aquascape,
What is
obviously.
considered a nano in your head?
Anything under 10 gallons.
Anything under 10, okay.
Yep, so 10 gallons is... 10 is actually, like, there are square 10-gallon nano tanks, so that they usually just fit right on the counter. The way they're shaped is really good. So those sometimes are really considered a nano tank.
I think this one right here is a 5-gallon, and the one right next to it is 15 gallons. Just for some perspective for people.
Yeah. See, I have like fluo flexes that are 15 gallons, and they would kind of be considered a nano. They're pretty small still, even though they're 15. The way they're shaped and like how much of the footprint, there's not much to it, but you could still put like quite a bit of fish in that one. And it's like one of the nicest footprints for a tank for like a little bit more than a nano to me. But it looks like a nano. Most people would consider that a nano tank, especially when you're talking like mass scale, even though like 100 and plus. So there are people that even had like 30 gallons that are like considered nanos to them. I'm like, that's kind of pushing it when I can put like gouramis in that, So, but that's where you usually differ. It's usually when you can fit it on your counter. It's kind of what I say is it's a nano.
I think I'm going to skip over some of the aquascaping styles because I feel like that's getting too much in the weeds for a beginner. I think one thing that might be beneficial if you're starting off new is also looking on Pinterest, on Instagram, Facebook. There's lots of aquarium groups, and there's lots of people who like to share what they create on those different platforms. So I think if you could find something that really speaks to you and something you want to recreate, that would be beneficial if you're a beginner anytime, but especially if you're a beginner. And one of the things is a lot of those people who are sharing it because they enjoy the sharing, they enjoy the education. So reaching out to them and just asking for some tips, like what they did. I know me as an aquarium hobbyist, I'm always happy to provide some insight and advice and perspective and help people think through ideas. Like I'm thinking about this type of species, like what kind of husbandry do I need to provide for this species? Like what's the environment needed? Is there special pH? Is there special chemicals? Is there certain things I should be testing to make sure that I'm providing the correct environment for those animals? And if they're sharing it, it's because they enjoy sharing it. So they're not going to be offended if you reach out to them.
I actually had this happen for the first time ever. And I post multiple content, different scapes. Someone reached out to me about the tank that I did with your rock, with the pink rose glitter rock and the garnet sand and the honeycomb wood. And was like, they reached out, said that they want to do this scape and this style. Would it be good for planted tank? And I explained to them what they could do to make it a planted tank and still look and give you the same effect, because there was really thin substrate in that one. And I was like, just do this, this, and this. And they were like, thank you. And I was like, so cool. I was like so honored that someone wants to do my scape. And then they asked if it was appropriate for their plants too, because you look at a tank and normally you would think, oh, that's great. It's aquascaped. It's ready for plants. But sometimes the aquascapes are not ready for plants. That's not something I would fully plant out because it's not going to survive in the long run. It would do okay for a little while. Like sand is sand. Sand will provide nutrients. If you put enough fish in there, it'll still provide a lot of nutrients, but you need to have something in the long run for those plants as well.
Yeah. Millie, this is why I was really excited about Millie joining in the chat, because she is new to this. And she's had some of those beginner fails that I think we've all experienced at some point. But it's a good question. I had it for episode 2, part 2, talking about livestock, but I feel like this is something that beginners want to jump into immediately. Like, you see, we're talking about a fish tank, it's because you want fish, right? Like, you don't fence in your yard for a dog if you don't want a dog.
Right.
How many fish would you recommend a beginner start off with? She said, does it depend on the fish? I think it depends on a lot of stuff. But typically, I would tell a beginner to wait on the fish part, but I know that doesn't always happen. What advice do you give in that situation?
So that
Shelby?
one is definitely on space, and because like the tank matters the most on how many fish you would start out with, and what species, and then you can go from there. What would do best? So like sometimes you could start with saying, I like this specific Achilles fish or guppy. What would you recommend for the tank? Then you can go there, cycle the tank, and then get those fish. If you wanted a more of a, we call them community tank, where you have a bunch of fish together, then you would have to just figure out, how big of a tank you can fit, and then we'll figure out a community fish.
This is why multiple tank syndrome becomes a thing, though, right? Like the tank I was talking about for my sister, it was like a little 1-gallon tank. And once she got it right and was keeping the fish alive, she's like, I want more fish. And she realized she needed a bigger tank. So she got like a little 10-gallon tank. Now she has a 50-gallon tank. So, and she has all 3 still running. So that's, I think, part of it, too, as you understand the needs of the fish. And as your knowledge increases, the number of tanks you want is going to increase.
Yeah.
I think we should probably do an episode at some point on good beginner fish. I think that would be a good episode. But just quickly, like off the top of your head, can you give us like 2 or 3 really good beginner fish? If you, let's say 10-gallon tank, I think that's a really good size for a beginner. 10-gallon, 5 to 10-gallon tank, and fish you would put in there.
Endlers or guppies. Those 2 are one of the easiest. Almost every color in those, every style, very easy to take care of. They can take a fluctuation of parameters, easier to feed on flake food. You could do neon tetras, any kind of tetra usually. There's some bigger tetras, but they're usually not available at the store. You'll notice the difference. I mean, nano fish, you could tell, besides the like emperor tetras that are huge, or bleeding hearts that are a little bit bigger at the store, even as babies. But those 3 are all around great fish because they're all pretty simple to take care of. But you would also need to know your water chemistry. But most fish will be okay with 7 pH, which is what your
tap water.
A lot of people have. But then there's a lot of people that have harder. But guppies, endlers can take both of those and some tetras.
And of course, like Maxie Kelly, Fishkeeper, said, shrimp.
Yeah,
I think a lot of beginners don't start thinking shrimp. They start thinking, I want a fish tank for fish. And then they graduate to shrimp.
Yeah. Yeah, usually, and when people ask me for fish, I don't recommend shrimp because usually they want to see something swimming around in the tank. And I love shrimp, but you have to get them going and breeding a lot, and you can't put anything else in there. So it's going to take a little bit for them to be a more active inhabitant in the tank.
So you mentioned parameters. If a new person's watching this, I have a feeling they're probably completely thrown off by this at this point. So let's talk about gear a little bit. what kind of gear do we need? Like I made the joke earlier, whatever you think you're going to spend, it's going to be more.
Yeah.
But it's true because you don't know what you don't know. So if we just like, I have a checklist here in our notes about different things that you might need. Can we go over that a little bit for people?
Yeah, so the tank obviously is a number one. This can range from prices. This is
Though
where
I have seen where people get the fish first and then say, "Oh crap, where am I putting it?" Like at the fair and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Or you buy a little beta and you're like, "Crap, where does this go?"
Yep, goldfish, that's happened a lot. People don't realize that, and it's like that goldfish is out going to grow that tank real quick too, and you're going to need a pond, so start preparing now. But that's the thing, is like getting the right tank for it. These can range in price. You know, that's why I like say the 10 gallons like these are standard because they come at a pretty good, decent price. Where some nanos are pretty expensive depending on the clarity of the glass and how, you know, if they have filtration built in. But if you think of that, that's where we can wrap in filtration, because that's another thing you got to think of. Cost is filtering the tank. You do need to filter it. It will prolong the life of your, you know, inhabitants in the tank. I know some people don't do filters, but it will help in the long run with plants and the overall health of your fish.
So I know there's a couple
shrimp.
of different filters options too, right?
Yeah.
What are those?
So for nanos, you could do like sponge filters, which are usually recommended.
And you have some behind you, right? That's what you use?
Yeah, so it's hard to see them, but they're all double-sided sponge filters, and that's almost 95% of what we use in the house is sponge filters, and I use those before I even got into like the multiple tanks. I actually avid for sponge filters. They're just super easy to clean. You don't have to replace the filters like you do on the hang on the back. The hang on the back now will polish your tank. They will be super crystal clear. So if you plan on having like one tank, do a hang on the back. It'll look super nice. They clean really well, and then you just replace those every once in a while. And they're pretty affordable depending on
not the whole
which,
thing, just the filter media, right?
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. So I have seen people do that where they think they have to replace. It's just the filter media, which is usually like a carbon, which you don't have to do all three of them ever.
I had a friend who didn't realize it could be opened, and she was like, "Man, this is so expensive. I keep having to replace the filter." And it took me a second to realize she was buying a complete new filter each time. And I was like, sending her pricing, and she's like, "No, it's way more expensive than that." I was like, "Show me what you're buying." And took me a second to realize she was replacing the entire hang on the back setup. So yeah.
And you don't even have to do that. Sometimes you just like so like hang on the backs usually can last a lot longer. Like some of them you could take out and just rinse off because the debris is building up too much. And that's the reason it's not as functioning as well. You don't actually have to replace that. It's got good bacteria in it. It would be something like if it's, you know, it's had its days. It's been running for a couple years now, and it's not really, and it's not working as well. So you would want to replace all of those, but you don't have to replace. There's usually like 3 different filter media in a hang on the back. Usually you could just replace one of those. It's okay to replace all of them, but I would do them in a tier system so that you don't crash your bacteria in your tank.
And I think we're going to have a whole conversation on bacteria here in a bit, but
and
in
then
a couple
you got the huge
weeks.
fluval canisters too. So
and then canisters. That's one thing I've never had. I've never had a canister filter tank.
Yeah,
I've had some, but I've never had a canister.
Oh, they're great. They do come with their, you know, expensives. They're a little bit more expensive, but they do last a lot longer. They do polish that water. So this is for more of like specialty tanks, more of higher end, like if you're going to spend money on a discus show tank, you better get a canister filter. Like you need that extra filtration. It will just help out in the long run. I use canister filters on turtles because they're extra dirty. So we've had multiple canister filters running on that, and then discus, things like that. People that, you know, if they create so much waste, you want something that can really suck out that waste, but you don't want to overfiltrate, which could happen with a canister filter. You don't want like a shrimp tank with a canister filter, because then you're pulling out too much in the water column, which
What
we'd probably
size
explain
tank
more.
would you start thinking about a canister filter?
At least a 55. That's like the smallest. I've had canister filters on smaller tanks, but they're like planted tanks, and like more fish in them. You would want to make sure that they have some.
I feel like a canister filter isn't necessarily appropriate for a beginner also, right? Like that's starting to be a bit too advanced.
Yeah. Yeah. Most of the time you don't want to spend that much money unless you're buying like a bigger setup. Like we just sold one of our fluval shaker setups, and it comes with a canister. That's a bigger tank. It's usually going to be used for planted or bigger fish. So that one's okay if you're kind of newer, but most of the time, most people don't invest in something like that unless they know what they're doing. So that's where it comes in. Usually you're already in the fish hobby when you know about canisters.
All right, next topic on our checklist is a heater. So unless it's a cold water setup like axolotls, don't put a heater in with an axolotl.
Yeah.
Would you put a heater on most tanks?
No.
Okay.
Most tanks do not need heaters. I've had guppies, inlers, everything. Now, obviously, I'm from a warmer state, so it's not as fair to say. Now, when you are if you typically heat your home in the winter, most people do not let it get down to like 50. Most fish can typically go down into the 60s. Your tank will not really go down. Your house might be at 60, but your tank's probably at 65, 70. It doesn't typically go as low as it is in the house.
That's a good question now. What's a good temperature to keep at for those beginner fish that we were mentioning? Like, obviously, if you're getting more expert level fish, don't follow this advice. But if we're talking about the guppies, the endlers, the tetras, like you were talking earlier, is there like a rule of thumb for a good temperature?
I would say around 75 is a pretty good temperature because it's almost warm enough. Some of them do like warmer water. They seem to breed better when it's warmer, but 75 is a good overall healthy tank, and they'll breed for you. They'll do well. That's a good like middle point. You could go lower and you can go a little bit warmer, but heaters to me are not necessary unless you actually can't heat your home as much as you want to. Then you do need to have a heater.
What about
and specialty
beta
fish?
So I had a couple beta fish, and I felt like once I put a heater in, and I got one of just the little Ceche heaters that's like, I don't know, $7-8. The betas seem happier. Is that... Did I imagine that?
No, they do typically like it a little bit warmer, so they'll probably 78, 79 is right there. Most people have their tanks already up in that range, so it really depends, especially how cold your water is. Sometimes people do have colder water that comes through their pipes. So you don't really want too cold of water for certain species. Like I know the cichlids absolutely hate it. You know, like some of my shrimp, specific Sulawesi shrimp need 80. They cannot take it colder. So there are needs for heaters. But generally speaking, you don't absolutely need one. They'll just do better.
We're coming up on 30 minutes. I'm going to try and like speed through the last of our little checklist. Lights.
Yep. LEDs, very easy. They have from anywhere from basic LEDs, which you could do low light plants, or you could get a full spectrum LED that does a little bit better.
What does that mean, full spectrum?
So that will have the red, green, blue, and white, which on Amazon, they make them super easy. They'll say full spectrum. Those are the ones you typically want if you're doing a planted tank, especially if you have anything higher than like Anubis, Crypts, or easy to grow plants. And then you can go from there and get better.
Plants require a larger wavelength for photosynthesis. So if you're just doing fish, then it doesn't matter on the light. If you start doing different types of plants, which we highly recommend, they might need just a little bit more wavelength. So you might have to specialize that light a little bit.
Yep.
Do you put lids on your tanks?
Yep, we make these polycarbonate lids. They're actually a greenhouse plastic that you can buy from Home Depot. We cut that because it's a cheaper version, and it still allows light to come through. Most tanks that are like in the nano range have lids that already come with it. It is necessary to have lids on your tanks, not only from jumping fish, crayfish crawl out, snails crawl out,
I
shrimp will
had
crawl
a
out.
snail that I noticed had crawled out right before this live stream on my one tank that doesn't have a lid.
But the more important part of the lid is evaporation. That can be a killer to your tank and then make you really not want to do fish anymore because of it, and not realizing that you just changed the water parameters too drastic because you added the wrong water back in. So that will probably be something we'll talk about more with the cycling of the tank.
Yeah, probably. I think I have a whole section on chlorine. So this tank right here, the bigger one, I have a custom tank, Kraken lid, something like that. And then my big tank, I have Octo Aquatics custom lid. So definitely worthwhile. This bigger tank, it's not a big tank. The number of fish that ended up in the filter section before I put that lid on, I was like, how in the heck do you guys keep jumping over here? So, I didn't think it's Tetras. Like, I didn't think they'd be doing that much jumping, and luckily they didn't manage to jump out of the tank. They kept jumping into the filter section, so trying to get those out was a nightmare. Substrate, I think we talked about that a little bit earlier when you were talking about the garnet sand.
Yeah.
There's different substrates, inert sands. A lot of what we do is inert. There's nutrient-rich sands. We used to have an aqua soil that we had to redo the packaging for, and we have not prioritized getting that back in, but we're hoping eventually we'll get aqua soil back in. And then hardscape materials, obviously, like we're Aqua Natural, we're Pisces USA. Obviously, you need some rocks and wood in the tanks, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. You got to think about that too for your fish's health, because some of it does raise water chemistry. So some fish can't stand some of the rocks, but most of the time, generally, we'll, just pour some vinegar on it. If it bubbles, you should be worried.
So that's the safety check. If you can pour vinegar on it and nothing happens, it's safe for your fish. If you put vinegar on it and it bubbles, then you probably don't want to put it in with your fish. That's not a hard and fast rule, but it's a nice little way to think about it. I think we're out of time for today, so make sure you guys like and follow, subscribe, and if you guys can put any questions you have in the chat, biggest questions for starting a tank or gear, then we'll answer them next week in part 2. I see a question right there. Let's go ahead and answer that one. I just got 7 little rummy nose tetras and a 20 long that is planted. They share the tank with 5 panda cory catfish. First time buying those tetras. They're awesome little guys. So not a question. Yeah, those are gorgeous little fish.
Yeah, that's a great community tank right there. Cory's school at the bottom, and then the Tetra's school at the top. So
yeah, that 20 gallon long is such a nice footprint for a fish tank too.
Yes.
All right, thank you guys for watching, and we will see you